The following transmission contains unencrypted instances of explicit language.
Welcome back. This is part 2 of our tradecraft analysis of Elim Garak from the Star Trek Deep Space Nine series. Last week we talked about Garak's motivations and specific style of tradecraft before getting into some specific Garak episodes. If you missed out on part 1, there's a simple solution. You might want to hit the subscribe button on your favorite podcast app so you can always stay caught up with us.
David, we left off on the cliffhanger of the 2-part episode from Season 3 that Die is cast. The last thing we talked about was Garak apparently switching sides back to the Obsidian Order. Ooh, what's gonna happen? We're gonna analyze Garak's tradecraft in the second part of that episode and a whole lot more in this episode of Spies Like Us. The second part of this 2-parter is the Die is cast. That's Season 3, Episode 21. And, our basic situation is Garak and Odo have been captured by Tain, the ex-head of the Obsidian Order. He's got this master plan with the Romulans. They're going to do a massive strike against the Dominion. And Garak appears to have switched sides and gone back into the employ of his old master. We're going to find out that it's all bullshit at the end, and actually the Romulan commander is a changeling, and I don't want to talk too much about that at this second, but it's worth noting because but Garak doesn't know that. So let's watch Garak, how he operates through this episode. Tain and the Romulans want Odo interrogated because they know that Odo, as a changeling, has information on the Founders, which are the leaders of the Dominion. Garak insists on doing the interrogation himself, which makes a couple points of sense. Number one, Garak's supposed to be really good at this shit. And also he tells Tain that Tain won't trust him if he doesn't do the interrogation himself, which could just be, and probably is, a cover-up. In fact, I assume it is, to just protect Odo from being interrogated by the Romulans.
I think so too. I
definitely
think so.
Even on a super cynical level, you could say, like, well, Garak wants to know the information so he can manipulate it, but it's plus spy points and minus spy points. It's plus for insisting that he do the interrogation himself, but it's minus, I think, for explaining why. That's a little too much, like, for the audience's benefit.
Right. Yeah.
The real plus spy points would have been insisting because I'm back, baby.
Right.
So during the and then they pull a really what do I want to call it? It's a clever writer's thing. Like, so they want Garak to torture Odo, but they don't actually want to have a torture scene in Deep Space Nine. It's not that kind of show.
Right.
So they come up with this device that the Romulans have developed that prevents Odo from transforming.
It's a very creative way of creating the emotional experience of a torture without actually showing you, like, the torture.
Garak goes to Odo. He says, like, hey, I don't want to do this. I don't want to have to do this to you. Just tell me the information. He tries to show sympathy. Now, you can't call this necessarily proof of Garak being a good guy, because that's what interrogators do, right?
Yes.
Any sympathy that he shows directly toward Odo has to be assumed to be at least highly suspect at the very least.
Right.
And then, of course, we switch that with sympathy and also threats. That's standard interrogation process. He's very convincing in threatening Odo, but we would have to assume, I think, that the Romulans are listening. How do we do this? If the Romulans aren't listening, that's minus spy points for them.
Right.
But it's definitely minus spy points for Garak for thinking that they wouldn't be listening. And that's my number one worst tradecraft that I've found in all my things. that was total bullshit. There's no reason for Garak to think. That's not even how any interrogation works ever.
You're right. I mean, even in The Departed and in Infernal Affairs, they had to find a way to turn off the watching.
There's always that double-sided mirror. Like, interrogations are very closely observed by analysts and everybody. You don't just send a guy into a room and then, a closed box and then have him come out and just say, like, yeah, he didn't say anything.
Yeah. Yeah, they're like, that actually made my number 2 worst. My number 2 was the same for you, is just Garak not assuming he's being watched. But my number 1 worst is more of like a Star Trek universe thing.
Mm-hmm.
Why are there no cameras anywhere? Like, the only time we ever get cameras is when, like, the show decides there's cameras. There was a camera watching, like, Jake and Nog have a conversation. So, like, the whole universe could be using cameras somewhere. And it's not like Star Trek is that old where there aren't cameras.
We can forgive them for not all having, well, they kind of have cell phones, but they what don't they have? There's a lot of stuff that we have today. I think it was Bitcoin. Fucking Latinum. Are you kidding me? Like,
right? That's pretty. Yeah. No, it just bugs me that, like, watching the last half was like, okay, maybe there's just no cameras in the start. Maybe we have a Gattaca situation. And then I get one episode where cameras are being used. And I'm like, well, fuck me. Like, really? We need cameras for this episode, but we don't get cameras for it. Anyway, but it plays into the not being watched situation for this interrogation.
Backing out of tradecraft for a moment too, though. What I always say about characters that are unreliable witnesses, because they lie all the time and are known to be people that can lie all the time. You always want to see if you can spot times when they're alone, because when you're alone, there's no reason to lie to anyone, right? I noticed at the end of the torture sequence, when Odo has given up the information, he's turned back into his gelatinous state, and Garak is turning away from Odo with his head in his hands, visibly upset about what he's done. And only either A, nobody can see him, which is not what he should assume. He should assume that the Romulans are watching. Either way, like, the emotion has to be real, because him looking super upset about torturing Odo, if nobody's watching, has to be real. And if the Romulans were watching, it's counterproductive to demonstrate that emotion.
But why were they interrogating Odo in the first place?
Because
what did they want?
Because Odo is a changeling and they're looking for the Founder's homeworld.
So, okay, that's when Garak shuts off the machine, is when Odo gives up the big secret. Mm-hmm. Wow. Okay, so this is more like Garak figures out what it is. Like, Garak's like, I knew you were hiding something, and this is your big secret. I think Garak might have at that point believed Odo was serving the Founders, which is a threat to Cardassia.
Ooh, true.
But
true.
At that moment, when Odo reveals the secret that he cares about his people, and that's the secret that he's been hiding, because if it comes out that Odo cares about his people, he's already an outsider on the station.
The fact that behind his gooey exterior, that Odo desperately, is in personal turmoil over his inability to rejoin with his people. And of course, that plucks directly into Garak's heart of hearts, which he hides behind his own kind of personal armor, which is that he would like to return home again. He finds out that they're not so different after all, which is very Star Trek-y, feely kind of stuff.
Oh. Right. He probably thinks he's about to die, and he's got to make his peace, which really demonstrates that the hard, cynical view of Garak isn't the real Garak. And it's this interaction with Garak and Odo that they find out that they both have this just wall of disinterest or nihilism or a emotional type of persona, that there really is a person behind that shell.
Despite my little quibbles about how they got there with this episode,
right? Yeah.
It accomplishes great forwarding of the story and our deeper connection and understanding of the characters and of the characters' understanding of each other. Why don't you take us to another two-parter? We're going to jump way ahead into season 5.
I definitely want to take the lead on Purgatory's Shadow. Inferno's Light is just kind of the aftermath of that.
For the listener that remembers the series but didn't watch it yesterday, this is kind of like that two-part episode where Garak and Worf get captured by the Dominion in this case. And they meet Tain and Bashir.
Warthog.
Surprisingly, Bashir.
Yeah, the real Bashir.
Right. And
Warthog.
But those are the episodes we're talking about here.
This is one of those instances that I mentioned earlier that Garak flat out lies and is always there's a signal that DS9 receives, and it's Cardassian. So they bring on Garak to try and decode it. He lies to the entire staff that it's just a laundry list. And then he's going to a ship to run off because it turns out the code is specifically only decodable by Tain and Garak. Once again, our father-son relationship, which we'll probably get into daddy issues at some point. But
this is the episode where we confirm that Tain is Garak's
we do.
father. I'm not clear why Tain sent a message to Garak only. Now, Tain's situation right now is that he's been captured by the Dominion.
I think Garak's the only one he can trust, especially with the whole burning bridges thing. Garak was the one that rose to the top. The Cardassian survival of the fittest.
Right after that after that whole debacle in the Diaz cast, it's probably at this point even those bridges have been burned.
Oh, maybe he knows he's dying.
No, I think he does. I think he does.
And this is his reach out, even though he's not gonna explicitly acknowledge Garak as his son. This is his reach out. This is his dying moment, and he's gonna reach out to his son.
He might not be consciously aware of it, but it's very possible that he's seeking closure at the end of his life.
Right. But despite all this kind of storytelling that is super interesting, I really want to go over Garak's steps of tradecraft here.
Let's hear it.
He gets the code. He lies to the entire staff. Then at the bar with Bashir and Zial, he's like, oh yeah, whatever. I gave up hope a long time ago. Fake Bashir shows up at the runabout that Garak's going into, because Garak had been lying. These are the moments where he actually explicitly lied, right? He gets pulled back with fake Bashir to go tell Sisko, and then this is where he doesn't lie, and this is where his hardcore talent of storytelling comes in. He's presenting facts with very clear messages. And the first one I want to point out is when he gets taken to Sisko, he's like, look, this is a message of mercy. We need to save these people that could have been died. Because Sisko is that type of man. Sisko is a compassionate person. Then let's get to the Worf and Garak situation, which is really where it's really powerful.
Because Sisko's convinced, and he says, okay, I'll let you go, but I'm going to send my badass Klingon motherfucker with you.
To watch her, right? To watch her ass. Because Sisko is a compassionate person, but he's not an idiot. right? Like this is a captain of Starfleet.
Trust but verify.
Right, yes. The old KGB trust but verify that Reagan took from the KGB, right? That's hilarious. But anyway, yeah. So we have Worf and Garak on a roundabout, and Garak starts out with this request from Worf. Worf, I've been thinking about joining Starfleet. I was wondering if you could sponsor me, and Worf is like, what are you talking about? That's not, whatever, and he's going on this whole thing. You don't understand. I could be useful. Like, I think, he puts on this whole performance and he gets Worf to concede, I will consider it. And I think Garak is testing the waters in that lie, because I think that's where Garak realizes that he's cornered him and he's figured out Worf's motivations. And I'll get into why I think this is testing the waters. But after Worf says he'll consider it, Garak goes on about like, I'd be a great asset to Starfleet. I think I'd climb the ranks quickly and be commander. In fact, I think you should put that in your report. And he basically lets Worf know that he's lying about wanting to join Starfleet. And that's when Worf contests him like, you don't even want to join Starfleet. You made this whole thing. And that's when Garak says, well, lying is a skill. You have to practice it once in a while. And Worf is like, I wish you would stop practicing it. And this is why I think Garak isn't just practicing his lying. I think he's trying to get to know Worf. Because once the signal comes in to their roundabout that there's like I think it was a distress signal or something. And Worf is like, we can't go into the Gamma Quadrant. I've been specifically ordered not to take any bad risks. And he's like, talking about, oh, that sounds like a Starfleet officer. But what Garak does, he basically crafts this whole collection of philosophical arguments to Worf, playing on Worf's Cardassian or Klingon beliefs. And we all know Worf's like internal struggle is that he's a Starfleet officer raised by humans or whatever, but he still wants to be a Klingon and be accepted as a Klingon. So he starts using these words like turning away now would be un-Klingon. The answer is out there. We need to have the courage to find it. Brave soldiers could be out there and we could go save them. It's the honorable thing to do. Worf responds very harshly. Use that word, but you don't understand what it means. And Garak responds with, that may be true, but you do. And that's the moment that Worf decides, all right, we're gonna go respond to this message. And this gets back to what you were saying earlier, that Garak never puts on a melodramatic performance. What he does is use reason and logic, but he'll use very sharp words.
Brave and courage and honor.
He's creating a piece of content that Worf will accept. And it's not this pity me, why are you terrible? It's not, and this is all appealing to what he has already figured out about Worf's very strong principles, and he convinces Worf to. And this is my number 2 best, is playing Worf to go check out the signal. Yeah. But this is also going to make my number 3, Garak blindly charging in to just get to his dad. And I think that's really what's dragging. And these are one of those moments, like you said, where he's really breaking out of his character. He's taking risks that he normally would not take. As a spy living on a station whose only survival is having this tailor shop, he's not associated with any organization. He's nowhere else to go. This is a big risk for him to go out there.
I didn't have a lot to say about what they do in prison, except to say that getting Martok back to the Klingon Empire turns out to be pretty impactful politically. And it's not...
Oh, it's a huge.
Martok is, to me, like, like when we talk about Star Trek, I'm always saying, like, the Klingons are the biggest fucking hypocrites imaginable.
Right.
Like at every turn, they, they never actually practice what they preach. Amongst
Well,
them,
at least on a political level.
amongst themselves, right? Like,
No, but I think the people do, but like, because you find this out in season 7 that it's the politicians that do that, but the people still believe in this Klingon, I guess, ethos.
right. I bring that up because Martok is the Klingon character that gets introduced into the universe that is actually like on the Worf level of actually practicing what he preaches on the Klingon value system. I wished that Tane was making a master play, knowing that Martok needed to be reunited with the Klingon Empire, knowing in a super like 3-dimensional chess move like what that would mean for Cardassia, for the galaxy, for the way everything plays out, and that's what he needed Garak to get there for. Because otherwise, what is the point of Tane sending the message to Garak? Except rescue me.
Oh my god, you have a really good point with that.
I think it was a missed opportunity. I think just
no. I think
like,
you're right.
Just fucking one line of dialogue there
would have confirmed it
at the death scene, and then like maybe one line of dialogue, something like maybe later, like Garak like kind of mutters to Bashir or something, would have just like set that all fucking like on fire and made it seem super cool. But anyways, that's just
no, because we're playing the tradecraft game. Like, we're not going to get our hand held with that. That's like the sub story of DS9. I think you're right. I think they planned that. I don't think this. Man, that kills my whole daddy issue thing. I think it might have been. I
don't think it kills it. I don't think it kills it because it doesn't have to be one or the other. It can be both.
Absolutely, and he's an intelligence expert, like we've pointed out with Garak, hitting 2 birds with 1 stone. This is definitely a great moment for Tane to really like pass the torch over to Garak, type of thing, and bring Martok back, and it really secures Garak within the Federation type of shit. Wow, I didn't even think about that.
It is the plot wise. That's the major thing that changes. That you come out of this episode on the whole galaxy politics thing. The major thing that changes is that Martok is back with the Klingons. But
right, and who facilitated that was Tane on his deathbed. This is his last play for, bringing order to everything, and that Martok needed to return in order to protect Cardassia because he like foresaw in his 3-dimensional. Oh my god, fucking Todd, that's a good gem to catch.
Well, because otherwise it's just like, it's only like I'm dying and I want to be rescued or something. It just doesn't fit his character. Not at all. Let's take a quick break. It's time, dude. Have you ever danced with the devil?
Oh, we doing that?
Come on.
All right, you want a few minutes?
Oh, I need a few minutes. Yeah.
Yeah. No, I'm definitely ready. We're gonna skip Call to Arms.
Any analysis or look at Garak as a character and his interaction with the series could not be complete without a look at the episode, season 6, episode 19, In the Pale Moonlight. This is considered by many, many sources as being one of the top 10 Star Trek episodes of all time, of the entire franchise. Some people have called it the best.
Disagree.
Time Magazine, which of course they don't have the geeky slant or whatever, but Time Magazine literally called it the best of all time.
Are you serious?
Mm-hmm.
Wow.
It shows up. It shows up on so many lists in the top 5, definitely often in the top 10 by so many websites, so many fan sites. People love this episode, possibly even more than I do, even though I think it is indeed fantastic. This is the episode where we really go back to that idea of interacting with Garak can be a little bit of a dangerous game. The name of the episode, it's a reference to the quote from the Tim Burton Batman film, "Have you ever danced with the devil?" in the Pale Moonlight. So they're not saying it explicitly, but it's strongly implied. This is an episode about exactly that, dancing with the devil.
I completely agree, because this is really a moment where we see Sisko in a tough spot. And the only person he can turn to, like we discussed earlier, is someone that can do the things that he can't do. And I think that's the big takeaway at the end of the episode. You know, and we even get that moment where, like, Sisko's like, if I had to do it again, I would. There's no one else on the show that is means to an end that's also reliable. If you ever want to go to the dark world, Garak is the person you talk to.
The meat of the matter, as presented, is that Sisko has become convinced that the Romulans need to be drawn into the war. He foresees there's no way to win the war without the Romulans. And he uses Dax in a really great scene of where she's playing devil's advocate, where he...
Right, yeah, that was a great scene.
They're role-playing, a negotiation with the Romulans, and she's just pushing back. And that's what convinces him that...
they need proof.
Sisko's whole appeal is... they're not going to stop with us. They're going to come after you next. And they're probably already planning that. And that's probably true. But she says in her devil's advocate voice on the side of the Romulans, we would need proof. And so Sisko goes out looking for that proof, right?
Right. And who better to help than Garak? And Garak's plan is to manufacture that proof.
He's going to manufacture a lie.
A big lie. A big lie that the Dominion is planning an attack on Romulus. To manufacture that lie, Garak has to tap into all of his resources. But he doesn't quite just tap into those resources. This is a really good scene with Sisko, where Sisko comes to Garak because people are still dying and it's still like affecting Sisko. And he's like, have you made any progress? And Garak's response is like, well, it's dependent on how you define progress. And
progress. Well, 5 of my guys died yesterday just for talking to me.
Right. No, but before he says that, he's like, yeah, I found 5 of my contacts that feel the same way about the Dominion. Oh, well, that sounds like progress. Yeah, well, they were all killed yesterday just for talking to me. And I think that's Garak's first play into the situation to really test Sisko's decision to dance with the devil.
There is, right. Because he has to draw him in and he has to determine. So now we're placing Garak. Garak's playing the part of quote unquote the devil here. Sisko's making a devil's bargain. And again, we're not using devil here as in Garak's evil, but that Garak is a liar. Garak is deceptive. Garak doesn't always, tell you everything you need to know, but also, if you want to get into his waters, you have to kind of say the magic words.
Yeah, right.
It's how I felt. Like I was specifically thinking about like the moment in The Shining where the ghosts are first allowed to speak directly with Jack. The ghosts can't actually talk to Jack until he says the magic words of like, I'd sell my goddamn soul for a drink right now. And boom, bartender shows up.
Hello, Lloyd.
Right. But Garak is super, he says, this is a bad idea. We're not doing this. You don't want to mess with this. And Sisko's like, no, I really, really do. And I forget exactly the dialogue bit, but
the first one or the prior to the progress. The earlier was like, "Are you sure?" And then he's, "Yes, I'm sure." And that's why I think the progress scene is really the contract. And I think what you pointed out is that Garak made up the whole idea that his 5 contacts had been killed, or 9.
Yeah, we're getting to that.
Yeah,
but he really, like, until Sisko tells him straight to his face very convincingly, I will do anything. Like, I want to make this bargain.
Garak's first question prior to the progress scene is to do something like that would be a very messy and bloody process. And then Sisko's
like, I don't know if you've noticed, but we're getting assaulted too and reinforced by these casualty reports that are constantly coming in that Sisko's right. like, being driven mental by. And but he says Garak is not going to help him until he says the magic words, which are basically something along the lines of, I don't care what it costs. I need this done. I will do anything. And that is, I think, like, kind of supposed to be the metaphorical magic phrase that unlocks the devil into being allowed to start doing his work. Like, they don't literally sign a contract. They don't literally make a handshake, but it's just in there.
Right. Let's make it very clear right now. Mm-hmm. The objective for this contract is to get the Romulans in the war. We need to make that very clear.
I really like that you bring that up for 2 reasons. First of all, again, just going with this, devil metaphor, the devil is always very specific in the language that he wants used in the contract, right? And then second, but second of all, it's also it's not just there for flavor. It also works in terms of Garak wants to make sure that he knows exactly what Sisko actually wants, so that when he delivers, although he might deliver it in a, just like the devil, he might deliver on his contract in a different way than what you expected, or genies when you make wishes and stuff.
Right. Yeah. Okay, now that Garak is enabled, he crafts a plan to create proof. What they're going to do is manufacture a video of the Dominion discussing an invasion of Romulus. And the only way to do that is to, 1, get someone who can create a very believable hologram, and 2, find someone that can produce a real Cardassian data rod.
Yes, it's a specific kind of rod that has the property that the data written to it cannot be overwritten, modified, edited. It is unassailable fact.
Right.
And that's a rare thing, especially here in a universe where, obviously, I mean, we have video manipulation like crazy, here in our 20th century. Imagine what they could do in the 24th.
Right, exactly. And one of the things that I think is really important is back to your point about Garak always having his pinky on the pulse or his toe in the water. And why I think you and I are right that his contacts dying actually was not real. He knew there was someone in Klingon prison that is the best hologram manufacturer ever, that'll make everything as realistic as possible, and that his other contact knows how to get a Cardassian data rod.
And so he manipulates Sisko into using Sisko's authority to make these things happen, Like Garrett.
Well, one of the other things that he uses Sisko's authority is to convince the senator to come to the ship.
That's important.
The Romulan senator that they're going to show this hologram to in order to convince him, because that's so there's okay. Let's talk about intelligence in general. You know, you have your full intelligence cycle where, you know, there's a need, okay, or a problem that needs to be clearly defined. Then the next step is what needs to be known, right? And then how to do that. Part of that involves targeting. And the importance of picking that senator is because that specific senator has a lot of sway in Romulan Senate, especially for convincing them to join the war. And if they can convince that senator that Romulus is in jeopardy or under risk of attack from Dominion, then they can convince Romulus to join the war. So, one, he has to use Sisko to convince the senator to join the ship, which Sisko's like, well, why would the senator be going wherever he's going? And Garak is like, don't worry about that part. So Garak not only fixes a situation in which to get the senator to go somewhere, and on his way going there, stopped by Deep Space Nine, right? Then he has to tell Sisko, use your authority to convince Gowron to release this prisoner on a pardon with parole who can manufacture the hologram. Then Garak has to get a real Cardassian data rod. And by doing that, he has to get, some kind of gel, right? So Sisko now has to talk to Gowron, please pardon this prisoner. He then has to convince the senator on his trip that either Garak has set up the trip or knows that that trip is happening. Please stop by DS9. I have something to talk to you about. And Sisko has to convince Bashir to give him gel. Now it gets even more complicated because after the guy is pardoned to come create this hologram, he stabs fucking Quark at the bar because he drank 4 bottles of fucking booze and tried to hit on the Dabo player. So now Sisko has to go talk to Quark and convince Quark not to press charges, which then Quark responds, thank you for reinforcing my faith and rule of acquisition.
Right, because Sisko also overrules Odo's investigation, asks Odo to not look into it further, and then further breaks Federation rules by letting Quark get away with some shit that he shouldn't be allowed to get.
Right, exactly. There's like a list that Quark comes up. So,
but plus,
as you can see,
and it's even worse than that because he is actually like condoning. He's become at that point aiding and abetting an attempted murder or assault, anyways, on his own station.
Sisko's digging himself deeper and deeper and deeper and deeper, and as that's going on, I'm sure Garak's watching.
Eventually, we find out that Garak has played it 2 ways. And this is really fascinating. But actually, before I get to that, I gotta say, like, here's my number 1 best. Oh my God, 100%. When Sisko first approached him and kind of asked him, like, how are things going? And he talks about progress. And he's like, well, 5 people I talked to died yesterday. So if you want to call that progress, that's great. And at the time, I was sitting there thinking, like, I wonder if Garak lost any assets in that, or if that's just a lie. And then later in the episode, when he's coaching Sisko on how to sell this lie to the Romulans, he specifically tells him, like, make sure you tell him that, like, you lost some valuable Federation agents getting this information. Right. 9 or 10 should be about the right number. That's my number one best tradecraft. I don't believe Garak lost any assets along the way. He's basically coaching Cisco to tell the same lie that he just told Cisco a minute ago. As I just fucking love it.
No, absolutely. And I think that was one of the steps that got him to get Cisco to confirm, yes, I want to go down this road.
Mm-hmm. You know? Oh, yeah. Oh, right. It's like in for a penny, in for a pound.
Right.
If you asked your friend to help you out with something and they say like, oh, 5 of my friends died trying to help with this situation, you're kind of a little bit more invested.
Right.
At the end of the day, Garak has played a masterful double play. It's probably it's like I said before, it's considered by many to be one of the best episodes of Star Trek overall. It's definitely considered to be one of the best of the series. And the whole thing comes down to Garak having not only masterminded this step-by-step situation of leading Cisco to try to accomplish the objective, but also having this entire backup plan that accomplishes the same objective by assassinating the Romulan senator in a way that ties in with all the other elements. It's just fucking great.
Yeah, and this made my number one best. It was Garak crafting the entire plan as well as having a plan B. We have that scene where Garak's like, oh, I'm going to go check for intelligence on the ship. Well, aren't you going to get caught? He was like, well, he has 4 guards. 2 are coming into the war room with you and 2 are going to guard the ship. And Sisko's like, just don't get caught. This is another moment where like Garak omits information. It's very believable that Garak is trying to get intelligence off of that ship. What we find out later is Garak plants a bomb to later go off at some point to make it look like the Dominion was responsible for that bombing. So if the fake rod and hologram didn't work, well, we're just going to kill the senator. That senator's going to die. I'm going to kill the criminal we hired to write the hologram, which that's no sweat off our back, and the Romulans are going to join the war. So that's my number one best, is just having his backup plan that like, well, if the senator doesn't buy this, then I have this other situation that's going to accomplish the objective made by the contract between me and Cisco.
And I think that the reason that the episode soars up on the lists of everyone's favorites is really that final moment where Cisco looks at the camera and says, you know what? I would do it again. And then deletes the log. Deletes the log. You've never seen that happen before in Star Trek up until this point. You've never seen a Federation captain literally erase the record of what happened. and it was Garak that led him, the devil led him into a dance in the pale moonlight. And would you do it again? Yeah, you would, but nobody needs to fucking know about that shit.
Agents, please report for debriefing on this operation. The director will see you now.
Now, on the Spies Like Us podcast, at this point, we give a movie a star rating. This is a little tricky because we're doing television show, and specifically we're doing a character on a television show, which could be tricky, except that it's kind of not for me, because either way you slice it, I'm at a 5. I love Star Trek. Deep Space Nine is my favorite Star Trek. Garak is my favorite Star Trek character. How can I give it anything but a 5 on just sheer love, rewatchability? I watched when I first saw The Next Generation, the first episode, Encounter at Farpoint, totally turned me off. I said, this is bullshit. It wasn't until like a few years later that I came back to the series and I said, "Oh my god, this shit has grown! Wow!" and got hooked. So when Deep Space Nine came out, the first episode, I actually had kind of the same reaction. I think the whole idea of Cisco being the emissary super turned me off. I said, "This is some really fucking bad writing." Awful, awful garbage. However, I said to myself, you know what, Todd? You said the same thing about Next Generation when you first saw the first episode. So in this case, I decided to just go ahead and wait a couple years and then come back in and check in. And man, was I not disappointed. I love this series. It was a long time until it showed up, as streamable, that I sat down and watched the entire thing from beginning to end. For me, that was about 10 years ago. For you, that was like yesterday. But yeah, star rating. This is 5. I'll never. Deep Space Nine occupies the perfect space for me, like right in between, like the fun and romanticism of Next Generation, and the like kind of hard steeliness and hyper complicated ongoing plots of Battlestar Galactica. Deep Space Nine just it's in a perfect space. 5 stars.
So at the time this was out, I definitely that was a time when I started, I guess, watching film, quote unquote, to put my pinky up, I guess. And I kind of got, I probably was a later teenager, or I guess getting into my teens, and drama television kind of bothered me. So I actually didn't watch it up until a year ago. Like I had said earlier, I grew up on The Next Generation, and going back and watching it, I definitely had a new appreciation for Star Trek, mainly because this is one of the first times that Star Trek serialized, from what I understand. And, Ronald Moore actually worked on the show, and that's what led into the new BSG. And that BSG was the first time that I actually appreciated television drama. And, without going into crazy history of like serializing shows that aren't like soap operas, I was really blown away, especially with the later seasons. I think it's hard for me to give it a 5, mainly because there was a lot of episodic stuff at the beginning, and there was a lot of filler, so to speak, as a weeb. But I mean, like, a lot of the characters were really well developed, and just the gravitas of the show, and like the politics and the different nations and the different races on a more abstract level, on top of a more individualistic level that existed on the station, where these different opinions had to clash and live with each other. I'm definitely taking a 4 for the show, but I think I'm going to agree with you with a 5 on Garak, especially listening to you talk about him on the podcast, considering his relationship with Tane and his relationship with everybody else. I give Garak a 5 for sure. He's definitely a super spy, way better than Bond.
Even though, Bond, Garak, so much of his spying goes on off screen, though, which is going to be weird when we give park benches. But and when I name my best and worst tradecraft here. It's not a scholarly pursuit. I didn't, do a super analysis of the entire series.
It was tough.
These are things that popped out at me while doing research for this episode. My number 3 best tradecraft is just the tailor cover. It's great. It's hiding in plain sight, and just the way he completely maintains this who, me? Who? Little pinky next to the what, me? It's good. It's solid, and it's again like just the hiding in plain sight. This is weirdly enough the safest place in the galaxy for him, and there's no other character in the universe that you could say that about.
Right?
My number 2 best is when he realizes that, all of Tane's best, closest associates and closest little circle have been killed. He's got to go straight to Tane because that's correct. Either Tane is not going to rest until you're dead, or Tane needs to be warned. My number 1 best, 100% from in the Pale Moonlight is 9 or 10 agents. That should do it. You always want to make it sound like, many Bothans died to get us this information. Whether or not that's true, it makes it plausible.
Right.
Let's hear your best.
My number 3 was the fake assassination and the blowing up of his tailor shop. But it wasn't just that act. It was like the impact of that, of killing 2 birds with 1 stone, where 1, he gets Odo to start investigating, and number 2, he could track the trail of the assassins before they got to him. That was a really good play. Number 2 was him convincing Worf to follow that signal. He one, tested the waters to really get to know Worf, because they really didn't have any interaction. And, he's not a guy that Worf would get along with in general, but now's an opportunity for him to get to know him. And so he lied about wanting to join Starfleet, got a little bit more information, and then colored his entire narrative to him to convince him to follow the distress signal. But my number 1 by far is Garak's entire plan with Sisko, and having a plan B where, all right, let's manufacture evidence for the Romulans. And if it doesn't work out, I'm going to make an assassination look like it was the Dominion, which is really a callback to A Man Who Knew Too Much, our first episodes on this podcast, where you have a political figure assassinated in a different country or territory.
Oh, right. Yeah, it always does come back to that, doesn't it?
Yeah, it does.
Yeah, both of our number 1 bests came from Pale Moonlight. It's the essential Garak episode. My number 3 worst is from The Wire. Using the name Elim in his stories. Okay, yeah, I get it. He's in pain. He's reaching out, blah, 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 story stuff. But, on a purely utilitarian, cynical, spycraft level, just never give even a hint of your real name. That's only my number 3 worst. My number 2 worst, again, it's in service to the story. I realized at some point it had to happen, but he could have accomplished maybe the same things without telling Odo that he was, in fact, a prior member of the Obsidian Order in the episode where they go and get captured by Tane and stuff. And my number 1 worst comes from that same episode, thinking that the Romulans weren't listening. That is just bullshit. Flat out. Doesn't matter if they were listening or they weren't listening. The fact that you thought that you acted as if they weren't listening makes no goddamn sense, and also goes back to your whole thing about fucking cameras.
Yeah. Absolutely. My number 3 was Garak blindly charging in to get Dad with Worf and got them captured. To be honest, it was really, really hard to think of worsts for Garak because, like I said, he is our super spy, but
he's
better
also
than
kind of
Bond.
just got this super. He's, you mentioned plot armor before. Garak is kind of made of plot armor because anything he says could be true or could not be true according to the whims of the story writers. Whatever they want is what's true.
No, absolutely. That's a good lead in my number 1. But my number 2 is Garak, like you, not assuming the Romulans were watching.
Mm-hmm.
But my number 1, and thanks for the lead in, is why are there no fucking cameras anywhere? And the only time that I saw, and I'm hoping that I might get some other pieces of evidence from the Uber fans. The only time we saw cameras was on some random filler episode, but like cameras were never utilized ever, especially in the interrogation with Odo and Garak.
See, that's you're just showing off your Star Trek ignorance there, Dave. Because if you were real Trekkie, you would know that in the animated series they explained that the war against the Tellurians caused the Federation to lose the technology of double-sided mirrors.
Oh, well, there you go.
I am fucking with you.
Oh, never mind. Well, you caught me. That was a good Garak play there.
We're gonna land on park benches. I'm actually aiming a little low. I'm 5 star. I'm 5 stars on this character. I don't think he's the greatest spy, at least not that we see. Like, we always have to assume so much stuff.
Right.
I
remember we've changed our redaction rating to park benches.
Yeah,
so it's gone the opposite direction. So the more park benches, the more realistic. The less park benches.
Yeah, it's a 1 to 5 scale. Although we have been known to dip into the 0.5 for our man Flint.
Yeah.
But I'm aiming low here. You just mentioned a second ago that Garak is a better spy than Bond. That's true. But, in From Russia with Love, we did see more tradecraft than just from Bond.
Right.
Man. Well, it's better than Spies Like Us. It might be lower than From Russia with Love. I'm gonna go with a 2 park benches. What do you think? Let's negotiate this out.
I was gonna go with the 1 till you pointed out that with our new conversion, that Spies Like Us would be a 1.
Yeah, you can't put it with Spies Like Us.
No, not at all.
That's the bottom. That's the bottom of the barrel.
Yeah.
I guess
I would
why don't you compare it to La Femme Nikita? We give that.
Well, that's actually what it was. You took the words right out of my mouth.
Let's hear it.
I think it's around La Femme Nikita, which is we would have given a 1.5 park benches, versus From Russia with Love being a 2.5. I want to say it's around La Femme Nikita, but I also want to say that Garak was a better spy than Bond.
I know you do. No, it's not.
But
the Bond didn't get the retroactive 2.5 park benches. Russia with Love didn't get that rating because of what Bond did. It got that rating because of what the enemies did.
That's right. That's right. And also From Russia with Love was in a historical timepiece versus we got science fiction. But I kind of believe Garak as a better spy than La Femme Nikita. I don't know. I think I'm going to go for a 2 on this.
That's where I'm at, brother. Let's call it.
Yeah, let's go for a 2.
And that's Garak. Looking forward to what's coming up next. Tinker Tailor Soldier Spy. Boom.
Yeah.
Connection with the whole Taylor thing.
Yeah. We're bringing it heavy next episode.
All right. And then maybe after that, maybe Spy Kids.
Yeah, I think it's time for another goofy one. We haven't had one for a while.
I know.
And that's the end of our show. Thanks for listening. If you'd like to reach out to us, you can find us on Twitter at spies_like_us. Visit us on our website at www.spieslikeus.net. You can find out about upcoming episodes. Also, what will really help us out is if you give us a review on wherever you found our podcast, either on iTunes or your Android app or YouTube or wherever you listen to us. Even if you didn't like the show, just give us a review. It'll help us, give us feedback so we can make the show better. And it can also help other people who haven't found the show yet find out about us. Hey, Moira, initiate Protocol 9.
Protocol 9 initiated. This podcast will self-destruct in 20 seconds. The preceding transmission sampled the songs Ice Cold by Audionautics, Enter the Party by Kevin MacLeod, and sound effects from freesound.org. Attributions and links are found at spieslikeus.net. Editing by Todd Hostetler.